We have a lot of news to cover today, including Jerard Trotz has decided not to coach this year. Apparently, Pierre-Luc Dubois eventually wants to be a Montreal Canadien. Could the Rangers trade Artemi Panarin? We'll discuss all that and much more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I've mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about today. Lots of information to cover, so let's dive right in and get started. First up, we got Game 5 tonight for the Stanley Cup Final between the Habs and Lightning. Will the Stanley Cup come out tonight? Will the Avalanche clinch and become the 2022 Stanley Cup champions? It's going to be very interesting to watch. We know the Lightning are very banged up. John Cooper did make additional media comments today, acknowledging that the altitude and the air there in Colorado certainly played a factor in their performance in games 1 and 2. So after another travel back to Denver, will this be it? Will the Lightning run come to a close? It's going to be very interesting to see where things go. I do think there could be a few minor adjustments to the lineup. It sounds like Andre Burakovsky might play for the Avs. I'm not sure about Braden Point. I haven't seen all the confirmations of the lineup as I record this several hours before the game. So we'll see where it goes. But it should be very interesting. And we'll see tonight. We could see the Stanley Cup. A quick Memorial Cup update for everyone as well. Certainly, we have 4 teams in St. John battling for the Memorial Cup to be the top junior team in all of Canada. Last night, we saw the Shawinigan Cataracts defeat the Hamilton Bulldogs in regulation at that. So the Hamilton Bulldogs are 0-2. They face a must-win scenario where they play the Edmonton Oil Kings and absolutely have to win or they're going to be out of the tournament. They'll be 0-3 if they lose in regulation. Even in winning in overtime will, I believe, still put them in last place. Shawinigan right now is in first. St. John's in second. Edmonton's in third. But, of course, that could all change as they all play their third and final game of the round-robin section of the tournament. With last night's win, though, we do know that there's no chance that there's going to be a tiebreaker scenario because obviously when you have an even number of teams, that can happen with a team being tied in number of points as well as goals for, goals against, etc. It can often happens at this tournament. But it will not be this year, and it'll be interesting to see who moves on. So it looks like Shawinigan and St. John will go to the next round. Between the semifinal and final, and either Edmonton or Hamilton, whoever wins that next game, is likely going to be the team that joined them as well. So we'll see where that goes. A few other quick updates as well. The Nashville Predators today announced that they've signed young forward Cody Glass to another contract. He gets a 1-year deal. It's a 2-way contract. $874 at the NHL level and $70,000 at the AHL level. To me, this year is a really important year for Glass's development. He really needs to solidify himself or he's going to start to get lost in the shuffle here and work his way down the depth chart and start to see less and less opportunities. So hopefully Cody Glass can make some good strides this year. Vancouver Canucks today announced several changes to their front office. They've announced that they promoted Ryan Johnson to assistant general manager. Of course, he had previously been the GM for their American Hockey League team, so he retains that and now officially becomes an AGM as well. They've also hired Dale Talon, a longtime NHL executive, of course, to be a pro scout and a senior advisor. Of course, Dale Talon was under investigation as well for some other issues before he left the Florida Panthers organization, but he was cleared of everything. The league did confirm to the Canucks that he was verified to have not done anything wrong, so they were okay to make a hire. In case you don't remember, or you're maybe not old enough to remember, but Dale Talon was actually the very first ever Canuck draft pick back in 1970 and actually played in the Canucks organization for the first number of years in his career before eventually moving on and playing the bulk of his career with the Chicago Blackhawks. They also announced today that they've hired Frank Golden as a college free agent scout. Dylan Crawford becomes the video coach. He is the son of former NHL coach Mark Crawford. And Scott Young, a longtime NHL player, becomes the interim director of player personnel. We also got news out of Minnesota today that their 2020 draft pick Pavel Novak unfortunately has been diagnosed with what he called an oncological disease and is likely going to miss the entire season, I would think, or at least he basically said that he's going to have to stop preparing for the upcoming season and take a step back and look after his health. So obviously that would lead me to think it's obviously some type of cancer based on the description. He's asked for his privacy to be respected, and of course we don't know anything more than that, but it sounds like unfortunately the prospect may not be playing hockey this coming season while he goes through this battle. So we certainly want to wish him the best and hope he makes a full and speedy recovery. We also got news today that the Flyers young forward Joel Farabee, this was kind of surprising news given the timing of it, but ended up having disc replacement surgery in his cervical region and is going to be out for 3 to 4 months. There was no mention of any injuries or anything going on with Farabee at the end of the season. And obviously with the Flyers missing the playoffs, their year has been done for some time now. So it makes you wonder if this could have been something that happened during training or something else that resulted in him suffering this. But obviously we know the Flyers intend to be aggressive this coming offseason in a retool. And, having Farabee possibly miss the beginning of next season is certainly going to be a big blow to that. But obviously, this surgery has had a few more people have it recently. Of course, it sounds like the similar surgery that Jack Eichel had, and we've seen it be successful on other occasions like Tyler Johnson. So obviously, in Farabee's case, it sounds like he'll be okay long term, but at the same time, it's something, a big blow for the Flyers as they prepare for next year. We also learned today that Barry Trotz will not be coaching this season. Unfortunately for the Winnipeg Jets, who were really hoping he would be their head coach, has decided to not coach this year and take the year off. He did make it known through Darren Dreger, based on the comments that Dreger put out, saying that Barry Trotz was very thankful for all the time and effort from the GM and ownership group in Winnipeg. Thankful for the offer, but essentially thanks but no thanks. So at this point, it sounds like he's going to take some time, enjoy some family time, and kind of redecide what to do down the road. I think at this point, the Winnipeg Jets are going to obviously be going through some second interviews with other candidates that they had spoken with, and likely expanding their search as well to additional people. I think a guy like Jim Montgomery might jump to the front of their list now. Obviously, a former NHL coach who was back into an assistant role, who certainly sounds like he deserves an opportunity again. So to me, I'm not sure. Of course, he does have ties to that province as well in Manitoba, so it might be a good fit. But fairly substantial news today, learning that Barry Trotz would not be in the running for additional coaching spots this year. Now, on to the Montreal Canadiens. There was an interview with Ken Hughes on the DFL Rundown podcast from Frank Saravalli and dailyfaceoff.com and Jason Greger, and they were asking him a number of things about the draft and everything, but he did comment on Carey Price and his health and his future. So one small update, which I'm not sure if it's small or could be bigger down the road, but Hughes did mention that Price had a procedure. He said procedure and made sure he clarified, said not an operation. So I'm not really sure exactly what was done, and that they essentially were waiting to see how it responded. So it was kind of, status quo for now, from based on what he had said the last time, which was about a week or two ago, where he said that they were hoping to have an idea by free agency, but it was really difficult to say. It could be much later into the summer or even training camp before they really know, and that ultimately, regardless of Carey's ability to play or not, they still felt wise to move on from the Weber contract, where they knew he wasn't going to be playing anymore, to try to stay out of LTIR. But it wasn't even a case of, well, if Price has to go in LTIR, then they have that much more of it, and it could become more difficult to get out of it down the road. So ultimately, it's an interesting situation that they face. That knee of Carey Price has certainly gone through a number of checkups and procedures and testing, and it certainly seems to be far from anywhere near 100% that he's going to play next year. So I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't, but it could be quite some time before we really know for sure. Now, according to Rick Dhaliwal as well, the Vancouver Canucks have not only been listening, but actually shopping JT Miller longer than they've let on. And it sounds like, really, based on what Canuck comments have made out of the organization, that they were doing more listening and that they're hoping to sign him and all that. But Dhaliwal has two sources today, according to what he said on his latest show here with Donnie Taylor, that he says that they've been shopping and actively listening since like February. So obviously it goes to show that the contract negotiations for an extension for Miller, that they're really far apart, and that they're obviously nowhere near what they would need to keep him in Vancouver. It sounds like Miller's likely looking around 8.5, maybe closer to $9 million, and that the Canucks seen him as 7.5 range, and obviously if they can't come anywhere near closing that gap, then a trade is more likely. It sounds like he was made available at the deadline, but they didn't get the package they were looking for, and it would mostly be looking for younger assets, young players that could be possible impact players more immediately. I think would be likely what they're looking for, likely a first-round pick as well, and some other pieces involved, but that sounds like it could be something that they might be looking for. But ultimately, he also mentioned that Nazem Kadri appears to be on their radar for potential UFA signings to be a potential second-line center. So we'll see where this goes, but it does sound more and more likely that a JT Miller trade is something that is pretty much inevitable considering how long this has been going on. Jumping back to the Winnipeg Jets and the Montreal Canadiens here, and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Of course, I'm sure you've seen the title, the thumbnail. Is Dubois going to end up in Montreal? Well, we get some information through The Athletic today from their beat writer in Winnipeg, writing the fact that Pierre-Luc Dubois, we know from other information, made it known to the Jets that he wants to explore free agency in 2024, which is in 2 years' time. That's the first time he'd be eligible. And at this point, I'll show you a little snippet from the article. Since it's a paid subscription, I can't show you too much, but I'll give you a couple of little lines here to give you some context. It says here basically that according to team circles and what he's heard is that it's no secret that Pierre-Luc Dubois would eventually like to play in Montreal. Obviously, this sounds like a scenario that he's kind of holding the Jets hostage. This is kind of Jacob Trouba 2.0. So I would think it's fair to say, based on what this article is saying, what else has been reported and rumored, that Dubois probably doesn't want to or intend to stay in Winnipeg long term. And you kind of have to wonder if Montreal feels the same way. Would they like to have this guy be one of their top 6 center icemen too? I mean, obviously they have Nick Suzuki. They might draft Shane Wright. Makes you wonder what direction they will go in. Obviously, it takes two sides to get a deal done. Obviously, you know, it's not a given that this would happen, but hearing from the local beat writer that it's well known that Dubois has an affinity to want to play in Montreal makes you really wonder. So the more likely scenario that many feel that are connected to this situation, have the inside sources, feel like Dubois is likely going to take a 1-year contract. He can file for salary arbitration if need be, get a 1-year deal, takes him to his final year of RFA eligibility next year, which essentially would kind of force the Jets to then make a trade and then kind of do what they did with Jacob Trouba. That way they don't lose him as an unrestricted free agent. And Trouba got moved to the Rangers and then immediately signed a big extension, and he was happy from there. So could Dubois kind of force their hand to do the same thing? It sounds like it's a very, very similar scenario. And of course we do know, I know it's a different regime, if you will, in Montreal, but Montreal had high interest in Pierre-Luc Dubois when he was being drafted in 2016. In fact, I've talked about this before on the channel. They had a trade lined up to move up in the first round to select the big center iceman, but it never worked out. So we know that obviously the number 3 pick was the Columbus Blue Jackets. It kind of put a wrinkle in everything. They selected Dubois, but many felt that they would select Jesse Puljujarvi. Obviously, we had Matthews and Laine go 1-2 to Toronto, Winnipeg. Columbus had that number 3 pick. Puljujarvi, even though looking back now, isn't the third best player in that draft, but at the time he was highly rated, and most people felt he would be the third player picked in the draft. So a lot of people were quite surprised that Columbus went off the board a little bit and selected Dubois, who was rated a little bit lower. In retrospect, it was a good move, but at the time it was very surprising. But there was a trade involved that was lined up between the Montreal Canadiens, who were lower ranked on this draft board, to move up. They had a deal in place with the Vancouver Canucks for Montreal to get the number 5 overall pick for PK Subban, to send PK to Vancouver. And then, of course, Edmonton was picking at number 4. They ended up getting Jesse Puljujarvi because of the fact that he was still on the board, because the Jackets took Dubois. But essentially, the Oilers were rumored to be selecting Mikhail Sergachev at number 4. And then that still left Matthew Tkachuk, who surprisingly wouldn't have gone to Edmonton. I mean, Edmonton should have taken Tkachuk, really, but at the same time they didn't. But at the end of the day, he still probably would have went to Calgary if all this would have went down. So essentially, the Habs could have got their big center iceman that they wanted back then, but it never worked out because the trade was contingent on everybody getting the player they wanted. And Columbus and Kekalainen threw a monkey wrench and all that, and it never happened. So there's certainly a connection there. I know it's a different group of people running the team, but you have to wonder if Pierre-Luc Dubois is trying to get himself in a situation where he'll essentially not really force his way, but kind of make his way to Montreal by getting what he wants to become a UFA in 2024, or could we see a trade sooner? I don't think the Jets are going to panic here and make a trade right away. They have time to figure this out. They may try to do their best to try to win as much as they can this year and have a successful season before they have to consider making more of these moves. But if it's not this offseason, then it sounds like it's very likely next offseason that Dubois could be moved, but it's going to be tough. He's going to hold a lot of leverage here, because if he doesn't get to be traded where he wants, then he's not likely going to sign an extension, which is going to lower his value. So it kind of puts the handcuffs on and make things very difficult. But these RFAs today have more power and more leverage than they ever have before, and they're certainly not afraid to use it in some of these cases. Now, in a very surprising update as well, there was an athletic article from Arthur Staple covered in the New York Rangers today, suggesting that there could be a rift developing between Artemi Panarin and Chris Drury, the general manager. Essentially, he says there that he has two sources confirming that Chris Drury was not overly pleased with the performance of Artemi Panarin through the Stanley Cup playoffs. He essentially felt he was very inconsistent. The numbers don't look too bad if you look at the stats, but I know from watching all the games, like I commented on that throughout the playoffs as well, that some games Panarin looked engaged and other games he didn't. I wondered if maybe he was injured. We haven't heard about anything like that, so I don't know that we can say that he was. But essentially in his article, he was going over some potential roster changes and look over who was a lock to stay, who's a lock to maybe leave. Like, he's got it all broken down into categories, and he put Panarin in the category of likely staying, but with a question mark, right? And this is why. So it makes you wonder if the rift became enough. Would Panarin, request a trade, or would they consider a move? I mean, he does have a lot of protection in his contract, so he can call his own shot, and it's a lot of money. So as much as it might not be easy to do, he's a star player that a lot of teams would love to have. And I don't know that we're really at a point to say that this is likely or unlikely to happen, but like most teams, the Rangers are now, after having all these young players have really solid couple years, are either already in or about to get their next contracts and are going to be facing a very tight cap squeeze like most teams around the league. So, it makes you wonder, right? Would they consider something like that? I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't think so. But just hearing that there could be a rift between him and the GM does pose that bit of doubt. That makes you wonder if it's something that we could see. I don't think it's I think it's pretty early, I should say, that it's very premature to suggest a Panarin trade. But it makes you wonder if it's something that could come about if the situation doesn't get better, or how things go. Like, how much of a rift is there? Is this overblown? Only time will tell, but it's a situation I think it's at least worth monitoring to see if anything comes from it. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today, on the Dubois situation, Panarin, Carey Price, Barry Trotz, lots to talk about. Let me know your thoughts. We'll talk about it in the comments and discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.